The world is holding its breath right now as the US and Iran seem to be on the very brink of conflict. So, how did we get here? In this explainer, we're going to unpack the chain of events that led to this incredibly dangerous standoff in early 2026.
I mean, it doesn't get much more direct than that, does it? This is a really stark warning from a top commander in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, and it just sets the scene perfectly. This isn't just political talk. It's a very clear signal of military readiness at a time of extreme tension.
The answer, well, it's a complicated mix of military posturing, a kind of economic warfare, and some serious internal unrest. To really understand the whole picture, we need to look at each one of these pieces.
So first, let's look at the most immediate threat, this military standoff happening in the region. This is exactly where that finger on the trigger warning comes into play. What we're seeing is basically a high-stakes game of military chess. The U.S. moves one of its most powerful pieces, the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group, into a really threatening position. And Iran's countermove? A bold declaration that any attack will be met with overwhelming force. It's a dangerous dance of deterrence, with both sides flexing their muscles. But this military tension, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. It's really the explosive result of a simmering economic war. To understand the standoff, we've got to follow the money. Now, to get a handle on this economic conflict, you have to understand this term, the shadow fleet. Think of it like a ghost navy of oil tankers. It's this complex, secretive network designed for one single purpose: to get Iranian oil onto the global market, get around international sanctions, and bring that crucial money back to Tehran. So the crucial point here is how the U.S. is targeting this network. These new sanctions are incredibly specific. They're not just some broad restrictions. They are aimed directly at the individual parts of the shadow fleet, naming 9 tankers, their owners, and the companies tied to them. The goal is simple, but it's powerful: cut them off from the U.S. financial system, which basically cripples their ability to do business. And this isn't just a US-led effort. The pressure is absolutely becoming international. The European Union, for example, has taken the huge step of labeling the IRGC a terrorist organization. Now, that move allows the EU to freeze the IRGC's assets, tightening that economic vice on Iran even more, and really aligning with the US stance. Okay, so now we peel back the final layer. Why did the US and the EU ramp up all this pressure now? The answer isn't on the high seas or in the banking systems. It's on the streets inside Iran itself. It all started with a spark. In late 2025, protests over the economy just ignited across Iran. But this was about more than just bread prices. By early 2026, the protests had turned into a full-blown roar of public anger against the regime, and the whole world was watching. The government's response was brutal. We're talking mass arrests, internet blackouts, and a crackdown on basic freedoms. Tragically, the regime also used lethal force, and that resulted in a very high number of casualties. It was this violent suppression that triggered the new wave of international sanctions. So this is where it all ties together. You can see it's a clear chain reaction. First, the internal protests begin. Second, the government cracks down violently. Third, in response to that crackdown, the US and EU impose these coordinated, targeted sanctions. And fourth, facing this immense economic pressure, Iran responds with military warnings, which leads us right back to that finger on the trigger. And that brings us to right now, a high-stakes game of chicken with 2 opposing goals on a direct collision course. Here's the deadlock in a nutshell. The U.S. wants to cut off Iran's funding to stop its internal repression and its support for allied groups in the region. Iran's response is a clear red line. Any military attack will be met with a powerful response. As you can see, there is very little room for compromise here. And that leaves us with the critical, unanswered question. As these economic sanctions squeeze tighter and the military posturing gets more and more aggressive, what's the path away from conflict? It seems like the ways to de-escalate are becoming harder and harder to see. And so the world is watching to see if diplomacy can find a way forward, or if these 2 opposing forces will finally collide.